Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where we're just 1 week away from some major releases. Domestically, New Mutants and Bill and Ted 3, and the foreign release, it's not quite stateside just yet, but we'll get some serious numbers for Tenet. Remember, they were like, Tenet doesn't need the United States. It's going to get most of its money from overseas anyway. Well, let's see. But the box office is currently preheating, so we do have some stuff to talk about today. In fact, some of you are actually seeing Tenet today, as it has some early advanced screenings. I'm very curious to hear about your movie theater experiences. I'm going to ask you about it now 3 times during this episode. So if you're heading back to the multiplex, be sure to share what's going on down below, both if you like the experience or if you were like, I made a mistake. All right, so anyway. We have 2 major headlines today, one domestic and one foreign. Stateside, Unhinged drove into theaters with just a 4 million opening weekend, showing that Americans aren't returning to theaters in the same percentage as Canadians. Remember, with Canada's opening numbers last weekend being about, the Canadian box office being about 8 to 10 of the overall North American debut, we expected a number that was a little higher. 5 on the low side, 7 on the optimistic side. But 4 is not either of those numbers. Now, many people in the United States feel that movie theaters are not a good idea right now, particularly in the United States, because we're not doing so well with the pandemic. And in fact, many experts, this past week, a lot of people, I saw a number of articles saying, is it safe to go to a movie theater? And a number of experts said, I can't think of a worse thing for you to do, because you're going to sit in a large room that's not ventilated, not well ventilated. For instance, when you're on an airplane, they really filter the heck out of that air. But even on an airplane, you should wear a mask. And because movie theaters want to make money off of concessions, you're allowed to take your mask off to eat and drink. But, of course, coronavirus doesn't also take a break. So experts have said, not a great idea. So on that note, again, if you went to the movies over the past week or so, what was your experience? Did people behave? Did the theaters do what they said they were going to do? I saw a couple of tweets saying theaters were already being lax on enforcing the rules. Did you feel safe? And you know what? If you had a great time, we want to hear that too. I'm not just looking for dirt. If you had a wonderful time and you thought the theater did a good job, that's fantastic. Please be specific as to what chain you were at, and if you feel okay, divulging that information, what theater it was, so that others can, if you had a great experience or a bad experience, people can either go there or avoid it. Now, in some states, the local government won't even allow people to play around with this, and their theaters are not allowed to reopen. So as a result, AMC said just 20% of its theaters are open, Regal only 30%, and Cinemark, which I do believe is largely in the middle of the country, so they have a whopping 70% of their theaters now operational. But because New York and LA theaters are closed, that's not just the biggest movie audiences off the board, but that also means no significant press screenings. The Tenet reviews that came out late last week came from screenings in London, Canada, etc. For big publications, they can send anybody to review a movie, and in a case like this, they will. Very interesting, by the way, that Tenet only got an 82% RT score. Is that high enough to motivate moviegoers to head back to theaters? Or did Tenet suddenly get downgraded from must-see to, I can wait 2 to 3 months to stream it at home? I'm sure Warner Brothers is hoping for something with a 9 in front of it. And that's another downside of not having a larger pool of critics take a look at the film, because I think that a number of people who like Christopher Nolan's work are more in the fan community and online critics. I think the more traditional critics who work for the bigger publications that get this, earlier access, or will hire someone out of London to do a review, they might have dinged it a little bit more than someone else would have. So I suspect if Tenet had opened to the usual crop of reviewers, it might be in the 90s, or at least the high 80s. It's like in danger of slipping into the 70s. It's a little crazy. Meanwhile, New Mutants, I found out, as I tweeted to you last week, will not be screened for critics at all. Any critics. They just, either you're already taking a roll of the dice going to the theaters. Apparently they're going to make you take a roll of the dice on New Mutants as well. Bill and Ted, though, is being made available to review, and that embargo lifts this Thursday at 7 or 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the night before it releases. And again, don't forget that'll be available both in theaters and on streaming. You get to decide where you're you're most comfortable. And I really think that's the release strategy that everybody should use. As excited as I am about Disney Plus, its evolution with Mulan, I really feel that the best thing for everybody is to release all these movies both in theaters and on streaming, and then let people decide, but at the same time give movie theaters a chance to compete. I really do think it should be up to the consumer to decide. Now, some of the trades and the pro-theater crowd who are like, let's go back to the movies already, some people are very adamant about that. Not only, I think, from people from a political perspective, but a number of people in Hollywood want to get this gravy train rolling again. Although, again, I feel streaming certainly generates a lot of revenue, and nobody should ask someone to risk their life for financial gain. But anyway, they pointed out that $4 million is pretty good for a Russell Crowe movie these days, and they're not totally wrong. But I think that with no competition and a strong audience score, and quite frankly, a stronger RT score than I would have expected, I think Unhinged should have been able to get closer to $10 million in its opening weekend here in the United States. Hilariously, the top 5 theaters stateside for Unhinged were appropriately drive-in theaters, and that should be totally played up for Unhinged's ad campaign going forward. And it also once again begs the question why the studios have not been more aggressive with partnering with companies to get more drive-ins up and running across the country. I saw a couple of Hollywood people commenting on that in some of the trades, just wondering with all this downtime, why didn't they work harder to make sure that there were a ton of drive-ins open across the country? For instance, Walmart has been setting up drive-ins with, I think it's with the Tribeca company that does the Tribeca Film Festival, to show classics. Why aren't they showing these new movies at the local Walmart? I think that's a much better plan. Then as for that foreign headline, in China, one has to wonder, did local flick The 800 really pull in $83 million its opening weekend, considering that China is still also dealing with the pandemic and restrictions on theaters? It made like 116 or something for, including its previews. Now, to be fair, China is an incredibly large country, and for them, that's not a huge, it actually still is a pretty big opening weekend. I don't know. After all, I think that China has, we've been suspicious that China's been making up its numbers, especially when it comes to local films. I think China very much wants to present that their own films still perform far superior to imported fare-like movies out of Hollywood. And in fact, The 800 was supposed to come out last year, but was pulled to be re-edited because the Chinese government didn't like its political message. And what do you know? Now it's being used as maybe a political tool. So you have no choice but to laugh because you have no other option. But if China fudges some numbers, I think an even bigger question is, does Hollywood really care? China still funnels a ton of money into Hollywood. Hollywood only gets like 25% of the box office, but 25% is I think even if it's a fake number, the Chinese government has to cough up the 25% of whatever that number is anyway. So Hollywood's getting that money, and also they're getting their numbers inflated on paper. I mean, that's very helpful when it comes to headlines. You can't make it into the top 10 all-time worldwide list if you don't have China. So I think that they're like, who cares? Also, China has yet to go so far as to claim they have the biggest movies in the world. Like, they could take over the top 10 and be like, what do you know? The most popular movies of all time were in China. And I think then Hollywood would be like, wait a minute. Because right now, they've only gone so high as number 72 with Wolf Warrior 2 on the all-time list. And I think a good cheater knows how to cheat without upsetting anyone who could and would do something about it. Now, as for what people are streaming, over on iTunes, small stars and small movies and also small prices continue to drive the traffic. We've really, literally hit the bottom of the barrel over there. We'll see what Bill and Ted does this coming weekend. On Netflix, Lucifer, which the streaming service saved from execution over at Fox, is a big hit, with the first half of its 5th season shooting to the top. I know a number of you are a fan of that show. And then new Netflix originals, The Sleepover, High Score, and Hoops, all kept Netflix's huge subscriber base not just entertained for another week, but on the service. Netflix, they don't give you a reason to leave. But speaking of a reason to get you to go over to a streaming service, I am so deeply disappointed that new movie, The One and Only Ivan, which was originally slated for theaters and is theater worthy, it's really a good movie, it couldn't even crack the top 10 on Disney Plus trending. I looked through the whole trending list. It's nowhere on there. That is just shocking to me and a huge fail for the Disney Plus marketing team. Did you watch The One and Only Ivan this weekend? If not, why not? It was so good. Now, it's so sad to me. Now, as for this coming week, Ravi Patel's Pursuit of Happiness premieres on HBO Max on Thursday. For some reason, HBO Max premieres their shows on Thursdays. They're like, Thursday. I'm like, I think you just make people forget that your stuff premiered. Then on Friday, well, what do you think about premiere dates? To me, it's Tuesday usually for streaming, like movies to rent or own on iTunes. But new content debuts on Fridays, quite frankly. All right, so anyway, speaking of Friday, Netflix rescues yet another show, this time from YouTube, Cobra Kai. Season 1 and 2 will debut on the streaming service on Friday, and they just announced Season 3, a new Season 3, for 2021. I know a lot of people who really like Cobra Kai, love it. So since not a lot of people watch YouTube originals, it's probably new to you, so it might be worth checking out. Will Cobra Kai enjoy Avatar and Korra, Avatar The Last Airbender and Korra level success as a new audience discovers it or rediscovers it? Also, if you're a Cobra Kai fan, convince other people to watch it down below. And then in theaters on Friday, you'll be able to see New Mutants. It's the only place you can see it, in theaters. While Bill and Ted 3, you can either see it at the multiplex or you can stream it at home. And I'm very curious what you're planning to do this coming weekend. And again, very interested to hear your own experiences so far down below. I want to hear what you plan to do and what you have been doing. All right, again, share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.